I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Brooklyn is the borough of churches. However, data from the Pew Research Center shows that church engagement is trending down. Today's guest, my pastor, is here to talk about how the Black church is responding to this issue as well as mental health issues.
My name is Lawrence Aker. I'm the senior pastor of the Cornerstone Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York. My role as a pastor in dealing with mental health has evolved greatly. In the midst of this pandemic, we have seen the need to collaborate with professionals, with therapists, with those who are skilled in the area of mental health, mental wellness.
The great missionary William Carey said, expect great things from God, and then he said, do great things for God. Think about that for a moment. You and I have to expect great things from God so that we can do great things for God.
So ladies, you know, we're talking about church relevance, but I want to ask you all a question. Do you think that going to church supports your mental wellness? I'll start with you, Phyllis. Does church make a difference to you?
Church definitely makes a difference to me.
Hallelujah.
Actually, you know, as I'm going through all of the challenges that life presents, I go back to my faith. And most recently, I've joined a prayer line. Mm-hmm. And so it meets at 6 o'clock every morning. Mm-hmm. So let's think, I'm retired. Mm-hmm. So imagine, I get up at 6 o'clock every morning to get on that prayer line. And that's how much that prayer line has meant to me. So yes, the church, my connection with the church and people in the church have created a community that supports me and my mental health.
Excellent. What about you, Valerie?
Hi, thanks for having me, Tony. I think church as well as spirituality and how we are able to incorporate that in our daily lives is very helpful to mental health, especially since we've been through a very tumultuous last 3 years with the pandemic, continuing having to face this violence against our Black community. We need a point to center ourselves each and every morning, and then weekly as well, before we go out into the world and do what we do on a regular basis. So I do think just spirituality and prayer in general has helped me move through this very difficult time in history we've been facing.
Oh, well, thank you. What about you, Colette? What do you think?
I would definitely agree with what was just said about spirituality. So for myself, I have a morning meditation practice, I have an evening meditation practice, and that ability to ground and center myself, like you're saying, before I talk to anyone at the start of the day, and before I go to sleep, so I can sort of clear out all of the things that I may have absorbed from the outside world.
That's interesting. So I'm going to answer this question too. I think church definitely supports my mental health, but I also am echoing everything I hear. It's the fact that I remember when I was a child, the pastor would say, it's not just sitting in this pew, it's what you do day to day or every day. And the everyday is the prayer and the meditation and even the affirmations, just saying those positive things and speaking truth into your life. So I think that it's really relevant. So with that, I think I'm going to invite our next guest on, Pastor Lawrence Aker. Pastor, can you join us? Well, thank you so much for joining us, Pastor Aker. Now, of course, you are the pastor at Cornerstone Baptist Church. And I'm delighted that you're here because I think you're a model. I think the way that you live your life is a model. So anyway,
thank you.
We have spoken a lot about church and its relevance. Now, if you heard what these ladies said, church is still very relevant to us. But we do notice from some research that we've been able to look at that it's baby boomers go to church. 66% of black baby boomers go to church, but that number goes down when you get to millennials and, of course, Gen Z. Can you speak to us about that?
Well, I think part of it, thank you for having me, and the panelistas. Certainly, I think it's part of the trend. And some of it is just biblical prophecy. When you look in 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul says there's going to come a time when people will want their ears tickled, and they will gather their own teachers. They will seek after people to say what they want to hear.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that's the season that we're living in now. But certainly when you look at the age gaps and what church means, still in the African American community, we've come this far by faith. There's no doubt about that.
So in terms of being able to get those who aren't in church, meaning talk about what you did during COVID when we weren't able to actually be physically present in church.
As well, like many churches, we had to completely pivot to going on a digital streaming platform, having all of our services pre-recorded.
God is performing miracles right now. We're going to worship for a moment, and then we're going to pray corporately and collectively. Those who are streaming online, whatever your prayer request is, please put that in the chat. We want to pray with you.
Then making sure we had a service to show for Sunday morning and replays, prayer lines. And also we were fortunate, we were blessed to partner with some other organizations, Chef Andreas, Feeding America. And so we had those meals started 2 times a week, then 3, then 5 days a week. And so we had constant contact with the community and our congregation at large.
But when we're talking about people that really don't see the need for spirit, yes, Timothy says something regarding that, but what do you say? Meaning, how is it that you're going to reach out to those folks that just aren't coming?
Well, I think we just have to be relevant and we have to be intentional. One of the goals for me as a leader, I want to be able to reach 4 generations, that because usually you reach a generation ahead of you and you reach a generation behind you. One of the things, the futurist Leonard Sweet, he has a motto that he says services should be epic. And he uses that as an acronym. E for, he talks about experiential, that people, when they come to the service, they need to experience something. And then also it needs to be participatory, that what happens in your service that they can discuss afterwards. Do you have discussion groups? Do you have chat groups? And so we try to do that after service, just having basic things in our multi-purpose area where people can stand around and fellowship. And so in inviting and also comprehensive. And so we try to make sure that there's something for every generation in the service, whether it's the music, whether it's sermons, sermon notes, whether it's video images, and live real-time video. It's just something that engages people.
Phyllis, I hear you. So.
No. Well, no, as the things that you're saying, they make so much sense. And I think about our younger people and how we nurture them in the church, the things that they need. They're the future. So what are those things that the church might do to entice them and so that they will find relevance? People like me, I'm not leaving my church. I love my church. It's part of who I am. But now we have a younger generation, and there's a lot of noise around pulling them in different directions. So how is the church going to identify, and what might those needs be? Have you identified some of the needs that the church hasn't been meeting that you have some ideas to move, to give them, to help them?
Well, I think that's an ongoing, we're all trying to figure out what church looks like post-pandemic or endemic as we see now. One of the big trends right now is with the metaverse, just trying to get grips with that. With your VR1 headset. With the VR1 headset, you have entree to an entirely different world. For example, with the VR1 headset in the metaverse, there are churches that are meeting in the metaverse, and that reaches the Gen Zers, because that's what they were born with. They were born with remotes in their hands. They were born with all the technology that we were coming to grips with trying to learn. And so when you say, how do you reach them, different aspects, there's one application in the metaverse world known as Rec Room. In Rec Room, you can take a group paintballing, you can take them bowling, you can have an open mic night, and you can have 50 to 100 kids in there. And so that's one area, and it reaches them right where they are.
Interesting. You know, I in a way, I'm backtracking a bit, but, you know, I think of baby boomers and then, of course, the greatest generation and how we were so tied to church. Share with us some of the historical reasons that Black people are so engaged in their church life.
Well, I think it's just part of our struggle. If you talk about, and conversely, you know, if you say African American history starts in 1619 and our forebears come here in chains, we have the invisible institution during slavery. From there, we go to the Great Migration, which is really where our population shifts. People from the South come to the North, and those Southerners came to the North looking for churches. And so that's how our Cornerstones, our Concords, our Bethanies, that's how they were built in the 20s and 30s with those migrants. And so it's always been in the DNA of African American people to worship God. Conversely, I think when you look at...
I like that DNA piece right there. It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA. It's in our DNA.
Yes, and you were going to say something else.
Well, conversely, you know, in the mid-19th century, Karl Marx said that religion is the opiate of the people, that it's just a drug for weak-minded people. But for us, faith has been what has kept us. Faith has been what has kept us in the midst of being lynched. Faith is what, it was the moniker for our civil rights movement. Faith in every aspect of our life. And so that's what we stand upon. And so it's incumbent upon us to reach the next generation, to share those stories. But we have to do it in a different way. It just has to resonate with them in a different way, because it's a how-to generation. It's a show-me generation.
Yeah, Valerie, do you want to add to any of this that you're hearing?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking, Pastor, as you were talking about the aspect of the DNA and how the gathering together was how we as a people were able to survive and get through the rest of the week, particularly right in the times when we were enslaved, because that was the only time where one can get together, you can socialize, you got to rest, you got to, in certain circumstances, not many, but be with family, whether blood family or what became a family unit, because all of that had been stripped away. So it was a time where we can think about not having all those things stripped away and have that little hour or two or whatever, right, to engage. So I find that, you know, quite interesting. But it has also, when you think about the times that we have now, you talk about the metaverse. I'm terrible with technology. I click on the internet and watch church, and that's about it. But people were coming back to their spiritual center, their church, in a different way. So I'm wondering, you know, and I don't know if there's statistics, there probably are, that a lot of folks who maybe weren't actually physically going, but started to engage in religious services online, have continued that, you know, that way of being spiritual because it's habitual. So that's kind of the one comment. And the other thing is that we also have to know we have those individuals in our communities and Black communities who don't have the same digital access, right? So we have to think about that as we move forward in bringing them together to be part of this church community.
And that's why I say we're literally trying to figure out, there's no book that you can get off Amazon that says how to pastor in the pandemic. That it has not been written. Not yet, maybe. I mean, we still won't see the ramifications maybe 5 to 10 years from now. But certainly, and then George Barna, he's probably the best authority on what the church looks like right now in the pandemic. And he says that 30% of your congregation you're going to lose. You're going to lose 30% of your congregation. He says there's another 30% of your congregation that is going to stay home and watch you on the internet. And then there's another 30%, that's the faithful remnant. They will be there on Sunday mornings. And so they say it takes 6 months to a year, really, just to get all of the things back in place. And so we've only been back for 4 months.
Right.
And so, we're still working through, but it's exciting. It is so exciting.
And now I'm going to segue into the issues around mental health,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Because we've just gone through a period that was very emotionally challenging for many people.
Yes.
So what was it that you were seeing? And I know that you're not a mental health practitioner, but you were a counselor.
Yes.
So what were you seeing in church? What was it that you were seeing? Were people anxious, depressed? What was it that you were seeing?
I think all of the above.
I was afraid it was going to answer my own question.
I think, church and mental health right now, that's a new caveat that we are all experimenting with. And we realize now that trauma, that's just the buzzword. It's trauma. And it's trauma that can no longer be attributed to it's the devil or it's a lack of faith. We now need to be intentional about supportive networks, about getting parishioners the help that they need. Because this trauma, and one writer said that the Black church has baggage, and now these bags are on the verge of just exploding. So we have to bring people in that can help our members. 30, 45-minute Zoom sessions, whatever it takes, from children to parents to grandparents, because we've all had to, cope in the aftermath and in the midst of a pandemic.
I see you nodding your head, Colette.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're saying is so spot on because of all of the things that you mentioned earlier about our intergenerational issues,
Yes.
right? That we know that intergenerational trauma is passed down to us, and then layering that with what we're seeing happening in communities and then the pandemic. So we've got this sort of triple layer going on. And I appreciate what you're saying as a behavioral health coach. So I'm curious to know, right, how are you opening the doors, if you will, to allow people to feel more comfortable? Because there was a stigma around, and not just in the Black church, just in general, around sharing, I feel depressed or I have anxiety. So what have you been able to do?
And did you say stigma?
I said
yes,
stigma,
because that is,
yes.
Thank you.
Stigma.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think, and Dr. Laverne Williams has said that as African Americans, there's a cultural iconic tagline of being strong. There's, when we talk about African American women in childbirth, there's a misconception about pain tolerance. And so this whole level of the African American race being able to deal with so much. And so we have chronic stressors. But now, just as the author, Bessler Kolk, he talks about how the body keeps the score.
Oh, I've read that.
Yeah,
oh,
it's-
goodness.
yes.
Everyone should read that.
Everyone should read that. Everyone should read that.
Yes.
And so there's a correlation that heavy life experiences take a toll on brain development and our emotional stature. And so now, as a Black church, once again, that's the buzzword, intentional, being intentional to bring the clinicians in, to bring the therapists in. And, we had a therapist at church not too long ago, Dr. Michael Prats, and his first statement was that the key to this partnership is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement. The individual has to say, I need help.
Well, see, that's the hard soil piece right there, though.
Yeah.
And I grow concerned because many folks who might need the help might not ask for it because they feel the stigma.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And also, there's this feeling that if I have my faith, if I am truly, in my faith, then why do I need a therapist?
Yes.
My therapist, and I've heard this over and over, my therapist, my mother, as a matter of fact, used to say that my therapist is God.
Yeah. I think that's one of the misconceptions of the eisegesis of Scripture. And I don't want to just go scripture, but
no, that's all right.
No, but I mean, one scripture that's taken out of context, 3 John, chapter 1, verse 2. It says, he says, above all, I want you to be prosperous and in your mind and in your health. And people take that out of context, saying that, we're always to be happy, we're always to be in good health. And it's not true, because saints have issues. I mean, you can be anointed and depressed. It's not an oxymoron.
That's a quotable.
Yeah. And I think it's really great that the church now supports that.
Yes.
So that people that may have been pulling back from that before accept it. See it.
The church is also the center of us accepting certain things about ourselves as people. Because remember, and again to go back, Pastor, to your point, that it's in our DNA, we couldn't make noise during childbirth. We could not show strength. We could not show anxiety, because all that meant death. Right? Up until maybe less than, and in some cases even now. So there has to be a place, right, for us as Black people to go to be able to have that release. So if you have all the services there, then it becomes automatically part of us becoming, well-being.
And I would add, though, that church needs to be safe with this.
Yes,
because
exactly.
There's a lot of people in church at a lot of different levels. And I would say that probably a lot of members don't want their business in church that way. So how do we change that brand around church, not necessarily being safe when you really want to tell your story, you know?
Well, I think one of the aspects, and just once again, when you talk about the Black church being the center of the African American life, I mean, our schools were founded in churches. Spelman College, founded in the basement of Friendship Baptist Church. Our insurance companies started in the church. Talent shows, everything, scholarship pageants, all of that started in the basement of Black churches. You couldn't go to the White Civic Center or any auditorium.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we had segregated schools, so the church has always been our solace. And so when you talk about...
But that's kind of community center, right?
That's community center.
That's the community center. Now we're going into something that's deeply personal.
This is the new paradigm.
Yes.
This is the new paradigm for the 21st century church, where it is once again, and it's not a bad thing that the church is not a one-stop shop. It was a one-stop shop in the 18th and 19th century, early 20th century. We had no choice. But now we can partner, we can have collaborations, we can get grants, we can do all of this that keeps us at the forefront. We can make references and use our resources to send people out. So, and of course, and then you deal with insurance matters so that the church is not liable if someone does do something unfortunate.
And there's also the stigma around, if I ask for help or need help mentally, something's wrong with me, right? And we need to change that. You know, we need to change how people perceive their mental health. You spoke about a mental health checkup. Talk about that.
Well, our goal is to normalize. That's our key phrase: normalize getting help, normalize mental wellness. We saw just even in Hollywood with DJ Twitch, young man, successful, multi-million-dollar home in California, multi-million-dollar net worth, TikTok videos, everything, giving joy to people. But as one writer said, he was struggling on the inside. And there's so many of our people that have that same, we all at some point or another. And so to answer your question, I don't want Cornerstone Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York, 574 Madison Street, 11221. I don't want that to be a place where people come on Sunday, have a great worship experience, clap their hands and shout, and then after the benediction, they're going home to the same demons, the same problems, the same stressors. No, let's match you up, let's partner, let's get help, let's deal with it.
So in some ways, this is a cultural shift. Like you said, a new paradigm.
Yes, a cultural shift.
So changing culture, because we're going to be wrapping soon, how would you approach changing culture at Cornerstone when it comes to the mental health and seeking services and perhaps triaging people to services or whatever that looks like? That might be the wrong word, but referring.
Referring, and that's what it is. It's a new paradigm. We're going to try it. This quarter will be our pilot, if you will. And
explain what the pilot's going to look like.
Thus far, the pilot will look like having therapists on site. People will be able to use insurance. People will be able to use other, venues, but we want to just have assessments, just someone to talk to, matching people up for children, for teenagers, for adults, men, women. And so it's just kind of a plug and play right now. But my prayer, our goal is that we can become a wellness center. Wellness center for mental health, wellness center for your physical health.
And I think that that's one of the things that are changing, Colette. We're talking about it differently. We're talking about mental wellness.
Yes.
Why that shift from mental health to mental wellness?
Because it's this concept of wellness or well-being, right? So we're looking at it from, and as you were saying, our physical health, our mental health are connected. And so you're looking at it from also, it's an empowerment standpoint, right? It's a way of saying, I can become well. I can own that I have whatever I'm struggling with, and I can move towards a greater sense of well-being.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Aker.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the work that you're doing at Cornerstone Baptist Church. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.